All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor. I'm giving the second part of the Laying the Foundation for Cybersecurity lesson on the PicoCTF YouTube channel. If you missed the first part, it's probably the video before this one on the YouTube channel. You can go check it out. Um, this is a project in tandem with Gen Cyber and PicoCTF, which, if you don't know, is a part of Carnegie Mellon University. So yeah, let's just dive into it. What I want to talk about today is systems, because in the last lesson I talked about how we want to secure systems and the properties that we want systems to maintain from when they're turned on to when they're turned off, including data, when it's created and when it's deleted. So I just kind of want to define what a system is, go through the different parts of a system, how you can attack them, and then give a little bit of history, or I guess reasons for PicoCTF's existence. So yeah, so I put this in here as a question, what is a system? Maybe in your head you're thinking of something that you, or what you would define a system as right now. But just think about it for a second and then we're going to move forward. So systems. There's a physical part of a system and a digital part of a system. So the physical part is the hardware, like the CPU, the GPU, RAM, motherboard, etc. And these are the things that actually manipulate the bits, the ones and zeros, um, like the slide says, that are encoded to mean something. So what I tell people is to think of a string of light bulbs. Some are on, some are off. The ones that are on are ones, the ones that are off are zeros. And say that there's 8 light bulbs and the first 4 are off and the last 4 are on. And there's like a chart of a language to say that that means the number 16. And each different um, combination of ons and offs, so ones and zeros, mean different things. So that's kind of what I tell people binary means in computer land. Really, we encode the ones and zeros to represent things like characters or machine instructions to actually do math like addition or subtraction. And then it gets more complicated from there. So the physical hardware is what manages those operations on the ones and zeros. And then there's software that runs on top of the hardware. So um, or at least I say that I like to think of software as running on top, actually sitting on top of the hardware. And those are things like your web browser, um, messaging apps, payment services like Venmo or PayPal, etc. So yeah, there's two components, physical and digital, and they serve different purposes. Software is what makes the computer usable by average users like you and I. So yeah. So because there's two components, there's also two different types of security. So my expertise, I have a computer science background, is not hardware security. This mainly comes from people that have done computer or electrical engineering. It involves physical components, and hardware security experts protect against physical attacks like voltage glitching. So voltage glitching is sending a big pulse of electricity to make into the computer to make it skip an instruction. So think of a computer as, let's just say, a robot that does a very specific string of tasks in a very specific order. So let's say I have a robot that locks a door. And to do that, it has to move its hand forward, grab the doorknob, close the door, take its hand off the doorknob, grab the lock it, and then move its hand back. That entire process, voltage glitching, let's say we want to make the robot skip actually locking the door. So I do that whole process, right? So I'd, move my arm forward, grab the doorknob, close the door, take my hand off the doorknob, excuse me, and then put my hand on the lock, and then the voltage glitch would come. I get a bunch of electricity, it'd freak the system out, and it would make the robot skip the actual locking instruction. But time would keep moving on, right? So then it'd take its hand off. So now the door's not locked and anyone can come in. That's the premise of a voltage glitching attack. You're making it skip some critical instruction so that it can, or so that it will do undefined behavior like not lock the door, etc. And this is even kind of a realistic example, right? Because control systems control unlocking or locking maybe locks on a dam, water locks on a dam. Or maybe they control, the function of a water treatment facility, and they control unlocking and locking the lines of chemicals that are going into the water to treat it. So yeah, that's a bit of a real world example. So voltage glitching, sending a pulse of electricity to a CPU to make it skip an instruction. There's also bus snooping. So when you think of physical components like a CPU, a motherboard, GPU, etc., they have to be connected by these things called data buses. And what you can do, since there's data going over these wires, the bus is just a collection of wires. You can put something on the wires to be able to see the ones and zeros that are actually going across it. And from that, you can infer information about it, or even get some of the data that's being transferred. So we call this bus snooping. And the reason it's a physical attack, like I said, is because you have to actually connect something to the bus to be able to snoop that information. Um, of course, this information is supposed to be confidential, so that's the property that's violated doing this attack is confidentiality. And then if we actually go back to the voltage glitching, the property that's being violated here is integrity. And like I said, if you miss those definitions and explanations, you can go to the first part of this lesson where I kind of dive into those different topics. And then there's side channel attacks. So you're exploiting information that's leaked during the execution of a system. So what that means is you're attacking, let's say, a server farm, a building. Okay, let's say that I know there is a server farm inside of a building somewhere, and I want to know what floor it's on. Well, I could do a side channel attack on the building's power meter to see which floor is drawing the most electricity, and then I would probably know what floor the server farm is on. So you want to know something specific about the server farm, but you end up just taking advantage of information that's leaked unintentionally, which is the power draw of certain floors. And then you can actually discover that information. So that's an example of a side channel attack. And the reason that it's a hardware attack is because you actually have to physically hook up to something to be able to analyze that information that's leaked during the execution of a system. Um, so those are three examples of hardware attacks. And the big theme is that they all require actually hooking up to something and either gathering information, or gathering data, or sending pulses of electricity, etc. So you always have to physically be there to hook something up to something else. So then there's software security. So this is my area of expertise. Computer scientists mainly deal with software security, or people with computer science backgrounds. And it's all digital. Like I said, it sits on top of the hardware, the things that actually deal with the ones and zeros. And there are also certain attacks that involve software. So the first one is a distributed denial of service attack, which is where an attacker sends a bunch of traffic to try and overload a server to deny other users being able to access it. So let's say that we're in traffic and we want to be able to, go past a red light. But before we get there, some, I don't know, malicious guy decides to send 500,000 cars on the same street that you want to use at the same time that have to go through this red light. Well, it's going to take you a super long time to be able to get there. And let's say on top of that, once he does 500,000 cars, he sends out 500,000 more. And so he just keeps denying you access to the street that you need to get onto or to get past this red light. That's the concept of a denial of service attack. If you've ever played like multiplayer games, you may have been booted off of a server or something. This happened to me back in the day when I played Halo online. I would get booted off of servers, and a lot of times it was due to people DDoSing or actually just DOSing servers. So there's distributed denial of service, which is like the picture here, where the attacker has control of lots of different machines and is using them all to send malicious traffic to the victim. Or there's just a denial of service, where the attacker only has access to one or two servers and is sending all of that traffic from one or two different places. So that's kind of the difference. One is distributed, so there's a lot, and one is not distributed, so there's not a lot. Then there's BGP hijacking. So anytime you send information over the internet, it has to choose a path of routers to send that information. You can think of it kind of like sending a letter. I'm in Pittsburgh, and let's say I want to send a letter to San Antonio, Texas. So I address my letter for Texas. I drop it in the mailbox. Then someone from the post office picks it up and looks at the address and says, okay, there's a plane headed for Houston this morning. And then it gets put on that plane to Houston. Then when it gets to Houston, it says, okay, there's a big truck headed for San Antonio. Let's put it on that truck. Then it gets put on that truck. And then when it gets to the distribution center in Houston, someone picks it up and says, okay, there's a, car going out this morning that's going to this neighborhood, and we can just give it to that person and they'll actually put it in the mailbox. That's kind of how the postal system works. Sending information over the internet is no different. And PGP hijacking is, instead of choosing the most efficient path for that letter, the person picks it up and says, this is in San Antonio. I'm going to send it up to Toronto. And then it gets sent to Toronto. And then the person in Toronto um, has to, go through the same process again. But it was maliciously diverted from the most efficient path. And because of that, it takes longer to get somewhere. And on top of that, the person in Toronto, if they wanted to, could open my mail, read it, put it back in the envelope, and send it on. So that's BGP hijacking. You're routing information through a less efficient path, and maybe you're trying to read it and store it for the future. One thing I heard about that's kind of scary, just a little bit of a side note, is that some people are doing this and storing the data in the hopes that when quantum computing decryption becomes a thing, so when we can use quantum computers to decrypt current state-of-the-art encryption algorithms, they can use those methods to decrypt this traffic and then use that data to train their machine learning models. So very interesting stuff with BGP hijacking. Then there's malware. So malware is just malicious programs. Sorry if my camera blocks the top right of that picture, but it's just malicious programs that do certain things. So on the bottom left here, I have a picture of WannaCry. It's a very famous ransomware that was deployed and infected a bunch of hospitals, actually. But what ransomware does is it encrypts your entire file system so that you can't use your computer. And then it demands payment to be able to decrypt and return your computer to a normal state. So that's ransomware. And then there's also other types, which I have on this picture. There's Trojans, which look like normal programs, but really are malware, hence the Trojan horse. There's worms, that's entire goal is to just spread from one computer to another. There's botnets that are make it so that your computer is being used by someone else for some task and makes your computer unusable by the authorized user. There's spyware that sits on your computer and steals your data. There's adware, which is the most annoying in my opinion for day-to-day life, which just sits on your computer and spams you with ads. And then there's more and more and more types of malware. Um, yeah, that's three different types of software attacks and um, what their goal is. Obviously, malware can do a bunch of different stuff, like ransomware is a violation of your availability of your computer. Um, worms, are a violation of your integrity and even your confidentiality, depending on what the actual worm does. Spyware, breach of confidentiality, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's malware. And then I guess I can go back. BGP could be confidentiality, and also could be availability if you're unable to deliver your packets or your information quickly or efficiently in enough time. And then DDoS is obviously availability as well. So yeah, all of these attacks violate different properties. So why PicoCTF? To draw this all back together, why PicoCTF? Why does it exist? Why do we care about these cybersecurity topics in the first place? So the first part is that there is a massive critical shortage of cybersecurity professionals. This article says that there is 3.5 million unfilled jobs in 2023, um, and that demand, the disparity between the supply and demand will remain through at least 2025. So there's, like I said, a critical shortage of jobs, or a critical shortage of professionals to fill cybersecurity jobs. Also, in the US specifically, the US experiences the most data breaches with 212.4 million people affected in 2021. I think the US population is somewhere around 350, 400 million possibly. So that's like 2 out of every 3 Americans roughly, which is pretty crazy. So we have a critical shortage of professionals, and these attacks are affecting a lot of people. To even further quantify that, in 6 years, 2016 to 2022, ransomware killed between 42 and 67 patients, hospital patients. So cybercrime can lead to a real loss of life, especially things like espionage activities where maybe someone hacks a government and they leak information, and because of that leaked information, government agents elsewhere get killed. Stuff like that has happened as well. So it can really lead to a loss of life. Comparatech, $714 billion is lost annually due to cybercrime. So it's a big money sink. And cybercrime is also used to spread information about elections, health information, etc. So cybercrime has real effects. And so a major problem and a lack of professionals to deal with the problem means that there's going to be educational initiatives that are going to try and attempt to teach you real skills. So this is why I am here doing Gen Cyber with Pico CTF, which is a CTF that tries to help you build those skills to contribute to your communities to mitigate these problems. So please play Pico CTF. Oh, actually, sorry. I have one more slide. Here's more incentive. If all of that stuff doesn't incentivize you, maybe a stable and high paying job will. The Pennsylvania average for a cybersecurity analyst is $47 an hour or $97,216 a year, which is a pretty good living for most, if not all, places in Pennsylvania. So low supply, high demand means that it pays well. And it's an opportunity for you if you ever want to pivot into cybersecurity as a career, or if you're at the beginning of your journey and you're looking for what you might want to get into. Um, yeah, stable and well-paying jobs. So play Pico CTF, build those skills, use them to do great things. The competition boots up on March 12th. You can register until March 19th. So even if you miss the start date of the competition, you can still register up to a week after that. And we hope to see you there. Thanks for your time and attention.